Welcome to Hub-Bub, the People's Podcast, where we engage our citizens and investors with the activities of the Planning and Code Administration and encourage everyone to contribute to Hagerstown's growth.
All right, well, welcome to the May Hub-Bub Podcast already.
I can't believe it's May already.
I know, getting right into the summer, of course, under different circumstances.
Yes, different atmosphere out there.
Yeah, we hope that everyone out there listening is doing doing okay under the circumstances. But nonetheless, our podcast today is really, I think we all feel, it's maybe one of the most important podcasts.
I agree. One thing we always wanted to focus on was, something our department that focuses on is safety. And I think this podcast is all about safety and education. So.
Yeah. So we're going into the summertime. And we know that families, they're looking forward to doing summer activities. Now, of course, they're going to be different for as long as we know. And so we're going at a time where swimming and that kind of activity is popular.
Yeah, a lot of people are probably going to be staying home, more this summer. And I think that leads us into what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, swimming pools. Probably going to be more popular than ever. It's one of those things to do from home. So that's why our podcast today is, again, we feel is very, very important. So we hope that you listen through the entire podcast. If you know someone, a family that has small children, they're going to be having swimming activities go on, have them watch this podcast because it is going to be very, very insightful. As our department, what we do is we focus on the safety aspects of it. And so there's some really alarming statistics that just kind of make it real. For example, the CDC, that's an organization we've come to know with the pandemic,
yes.
Centers of Disease Control. It mentions some alarming statistics. Children ages 1 to 4 have the highest drowning rates. And going back to 2014, among children 1 to 4 years old who died from an unintentional injury, 1/3 died from drowning. And among children ages 1 to 4, most drownings occur in home swimming pools. And drowning is responsible for more deaths among the children ages 1 to 4 than any other cause except congenital anomalies like birth defects. And among those 1 to 4, fatal drowning remains the second leading cause of unintentional injury-related death behind motor vehicle crashes.
Wow, that's astonishing, really.
Yeah. So, I was thinking about that, car crashes. It's behind that. Now, the odds of being in a car crash are slim, but we know that there's risks.
They do happen, yeah.
Don't we all wear seatbelts?
Yes.
To help minimize the risk?
Exactly.
Yeah. So with swimming pools, there is a large risk there. Why not have things in place to help prevent or minimize that risk? Because they happen so quickly. How often, Donnie, we see on the news where someone, unfortunately, their child has died in a drowning, and they're talking, and what they'll say sometimes, I just turned around for a minute.
Exactly. Me with a 7-month-old, he hasn't started crawling yet, but just you turn your back for a minute, and he's halfway across the room rolling. So I can't even imagine once he, learns how to walk, how quickly this can happen. Let your child out of eyesight for a minute, less than a minute, it can happen. Something to be aware of, for sure.
Absolutely. And I have 2 boys, of course, and they're grown now, but it's like yesterday when, we were just eyes on them.
Right.
We're just so concerned about our children. So that's what we're going to talk about today. These statistics are alarming, and we want to be concerned, and that's the focus today, is talk about things that will minimize this risk. And that goes back to codes, which our department handles. Right. So even though they may be cumbersome and they may be uncomfortable and, may not be one of the things you want to do, they're necessary. And it's not just drownings, too, we might add. There are other things that are part of it, such as electrical shock.
Right.
Some pools and things have electricity involved. And, of course, that's a bad combination. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about just general information, code requirements. As always, we say to our listeners, we're going to talk about general requirements. We're going to talk about codes specific to Hagerstown. But if you live in another jurisdiction, you certainly always want to check with your local jurisdiction and find out what the code requirements are. So again, we're going to be discussing permit requirements, why they're in place, and then we'll talk even a little bit about how we can maintain the pools that we have. But as always, an interesting part of our discussions, and usually what's part of it, is the history behind things.
Yes, this is always one of my favorite parts, to learn where did swimming pools come from. It's interesting. So.
Yeah. And granted, history may not be the most favorite thing to all listeners.
No.
But sometimes understanding history, it's kind of like if we understand history of our area or where we live, it gives us background. It kind of gives us a big picture, right?
Yeah, it gives us a why to, why we do the things that we do now. So I think it's very important.
Yeah. But the history with pools is interesting. Mm-hmm. It goes way back, some 5,000 years ago. There was what was called the Great Bath. There was this early water tank that was way back. It was in a Pakistani city settlement called Mohenjo-Daro.
That was a very good pronunciation of that.
Well,
were you practicing?
Well, not really. I mean, I did, but I didn't. I mean, I listened to it. So
good job.
Yeah. But pools, and they were kind of dual uses. You had these large pools. They could be used for recreation, but at that time, and going way back, everybody didn't have a bathtub or place to wash in their homes. So they would go to these large communal areas to bathe, so to speak. But really, when we go forward prominently in time, back to the times of Greece, they kind of started these baths. And then when the Romans took it, they just took it to a whole nother level.
Wow.
And it wasn't uncommon for Rome to have these large baths. We're talking that could hold thousands of people. Wow. It's pretty crazy.
Swimming with all of your friends.
Yeah. They were so popular that they even went throughout Europe. Everybody adopted having these large baths.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were even known, that is Rome, to build one of the most largest, what they called baths. One of them was 900,000 square feet.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was wondering, to get an idea of how much 900,000 square feet is, the Valley Mall here in Hagerstown, all the retail spaces are just about 900,000 square feet, just a little under.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And these were very well built, and the technology was something else, because not only were they just pools, but they were heated.
Okay.
So can you imagine a pool, but then there was rooms underneath the pools where they had large pipes and columns that were hollow, and they would have all these fires underneath. And through convection and transfer of heat, they would go up the columns, and they would actually heat the water in these large baths. So just a crazy amount of technology that just went involved in having these large pools and baths. So, and then we move fast forward to about 1907. Philadelphia Racquet Club, they were credited to having one of the first above ground swimming pools in the United States. So we're going back some time.
Yeah, that is quite some time.
Yeah. So then if we fast forward a little bit more, right around after World War II, then what technology came available was, movies and Hollywood. And what are the status symbols of Hollywood movie stars? Swimming pools in your backyard, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it was kind of a rarity still. Not everybody had one. They weren't well known about. If you had one, you were somebody. You might have had a little bit of money. But of course, over time, swimming pools evolved to where we see them today. All shapes, sizes. Yeah.
Some are hidden. I've seen one the other day that, unless you look closely, you didn't even know the swimming pool was an in-ground pool. It was pretty impressive. So.
Yeah. And because of technology, they've become more affordable. So that's why they're just so popular. You see them everywhere, right? And now people even have their own. They don't have to really go anywhere. They got a little backyard vacation.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we arrived where we are today, and there was an organization known as the National Swimming Pool Foundation. And recent estimates that it gives is that there are more than 10 million swimming pools across the USA. And that includes more than 360,000 public pools that are open year around.
Wow. That's a lot of swimming pools.
You ain't lying. So, what I mean, I thought, just because of what we do, you've got all these swimming pools, and granted, it's recreation and it's a time to have fun, but now the risk of accidents kind of enters to the picture a little bit more. And that's what drives codes, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. It's when you see the potential or you have accidents, now you put these things in place to try to prevent those accidents.
Right. The codes are there for a reason. Usually something has happened already, and we try to be proactive as you can with the codes, but unfortunately things happen and we learn from those mistakes. So
yeah. So when it comes to the history of now building permits related to swimming pools, that goes all the way back to the late 1950s when these swimming pools started getting really, really popular. And these codes were created to keep people safe. And again, as we've talked about in past episodes, going way back, there was the BOCA code. Mm-hmm. So if you want to find out what we're talking about there, go back and watch our first episode where we talk about the history of codes and how the BOCA code fit into that. But in 1960, the BOCA building code required building permits for swimming pools, and the same standards from this edition in 1960 are really still in use today. So although the codes have evolved and changed over the years, basically these same standards still exist. It's just the code's been expanded to encompass today's real life situations, and they still apply. Now, there's also another code that comes into play as well, and it's called the National Standardized Code. And in 2012, the International Code Council, again, watch our first episode on what that is, but the International Code Council created a standardized code for swimming pools and spas to be used nationwide. And it's really the only comprehensive residential and public swimming pool and spa code available. And the city of Hagerstown uses this code, and it's used it since its creation in 2015. And now, of course, as codes advance and change and are adopted, we continue with that. So we currently use the 2018 edition of the code. This year, the 2021 code will be the fourth edition available later in the year. So we didn't want to get too much into codes. That's not the purpose of our discussion today, but our first episode talks about, how that's happened. So, a number of things, just to kind of summarize what we've talked about. You've had this evolution of pools in all shapes and sizes and numbers, and so now to help create a safe situation, we've had to adopt these codes to do that. So, and of course, there's other requirements as well, like in the Hagerstown with permits. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So, a big question we get is a permit required to put up a pool at my house. This is my house. Do I need a permit for my own pool? The answer is yes. Pool installations do require a permit. And as Sean mentioned, this has been a standard in the city of Hagerstown since 1960. So for the last 60 years, a building permit has been required to construct a pool. Something kind of funny, last year we posted about how the city of Hagerstown and Washington County has this standard, and it went relatively viral. We were a brand new social media page just trying to educate the citizens, and it got a lot of attention. It got shared to a few anti-government pages, and a lot of local people had no idea about these codes. So there's clearly an opportunity for education on this topic. So that's why me and Sean are very excited to get this message out there today. And the International Code Standards requires that any pool that can hold 24 inches or more of water must have a permit to be installed. And this is for above ground and in-ground pools. There's also barrier requirements, meaning there has to be a 4-foot high barrier around the pool. At times, if the pool wall is high enough, it can be considered a barrier if the pool wall is at least 4 feet and rigid. All gates entering into the pool area must be self-closing and self-latching. And when applying for the pool permit, any new fence installation can be included on the permit application. And that's for here in Hagerstown, so be sure to check your local jurisdiction to see if a fence permit is included when applying for a pool permit. And in a future episode, we will be talking all about fence permits to give you a better understanding why we require those.
Yeah, and if I could add,
Yeah.
sometimes if you're going for a permit, and we encourage our people who are applicants to do that. If you're going in, make sure you tell us everything you would like to do. Because what we can do is we can, instead of piecemealing it, and you go in to get a permit and then come back for another permit, sometimes, as he just mentioned, we can include everything under one permit, depending on what it is, and that saves you money, it saves you time, and so it's a good idea.
Good point. All right, so what about ladders? So when access to a pool requires the use of a ladder, they must be protected from accidental entry into the pool. Here in Hagerstown, there are two options for ladder access. The first one is to have a fence off the ladder area to the pool with a minimum 4-foot high fence, or provide a lockable ladder that has been manufactured for the intended use of being lockable. Telling us that the ladder will be removed when the pool is not in use is not a viable option, because we really don't know, when that ladder may be installed again. And there must be a permanent solution to prevent this unwanted and accidental entry into the pool. Another thing we want to touch on are door alarms. So what are door alarms? It's probably what you have guessed. They are alarms on doors that, when opened, will make an audible sound. Door alarms must be installed when the house itself serves as part of the pool barrier, meaning the house acts as part of the fence. These door alarms are to be installed on all doors of a home that provide direct access to the pool area. And door alarms should last for 30 seconds or more and start within 7 seconds after the door is opened. It is to be distinct from any other sounds and at least 85 decibels. It's, just similar to any type of security alarm, but this will just let anybody in the surrounding area know that, hey, somebody opened that door to the pool. Mm-hmm. You might want to go check it out, make sure, kids or someone that you didn't want in there isn't in your pool. So.
Yeah. And that seems like a lot, and it is it is when you're thinking about what the code requires, that takes some time and energy, but you have to think about what's the trade-off.
Exactly. It's all surrounding safety.
Yeah. So, and we were talking earlier just a little while ago about how pools have evolved. Now we see all kinds of pools. Used to, you kind of had two different types. You had an in-ground pool, and then you have your traditional above-ground
Right.
pool, the rigid walls like you were mentioning. But nowadays, you have all kinds of pools made of all kinds of materials.
Right.
Large and small.
Exactly. Some easy to construct, some, take months to construct,
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes this can be a little bit confusing when it comes to, how we treat these types of pools that are storable, they're collapsible, you can take them down in a few minutes, put them back up. But what we have to keep in mind is that basically regardless of what the makeup, how the pool is designed or what it's constructed of, the danger is still there. Mm-hmm. So that's the way we have to look at it, is that all of these pools, whether they're very small, even the small inflatable ones, can be a drowning hazard. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll get questions from our residents asking, do these types of pools require a permit? Well, the answer is yes. It doesn't have anything to do with necessarily the size of the pool. Is it portable or not? Is it something that is a threat? And so people can get confused about these pools because they're so cheap. And in some cases, honestly, the permit can be more than the pool. It can be the same or more than the pool.
Right.
And that doesn't make sense. But actually, it does in a sense, because we're still trying to eliminate the risk. It's not about a dollar. Yes, we understand money is an issue, but the bigger issue is the safety. And that's why no matter what pool you buy, there is almost always manufacturer's instructions on there. Of course, we all read those, right, Don?
Exactly, yeah. I read them.
Yeah. So we're well informed in all the,
Yeah, all the fine print.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So when we read those instructions, it says on there oftentimes to check your local jurisdiction for permit requirements to install these pools. That's because the industry recognizes that there is likely some type of permit requirement. So we recommend you do that, whether it's Hagerstown or any other jurisdiction. You're going to save a lot of time and money and perhaps aggravation and frustration with you and your children if you just make a quick call to your codes office and see what the code requirements are. So we need a permit for a storable pool. Another question we get too is, well, if I take my pool down, say it's a collapsible or storable pool, I want to take it down, then I want to put it up again later or next season, do I got to get another permit?
Right.
Well, not necessarily. For example, if you're going to take it down, it's the same pool, and you're going to put the same pool back up, and you're going to put that same pool back in the same spot. As long as you have those same conditions, you do not have to get another permit. So again, check with your local jurisdiction because their requirements may be different when it comes to pools and permits you've gotten the previous year. Donnie, you mentioned earlier about barrier requirements or fence permits for storable pools. There again, you've got to have some type of barrier there. A 4-foot high fence can be installed if the pool doesn't have its rigid sides. So again, an above ground pool with 4-foot rigid sides, that's your barrier. Mm-hmm. But if you've got a portable pool, the sides are soft, some of those are just vinyl and they're easily collapsible, right, then most likely you're going to have some type of barrier, a fence or so forth. So it kind of depends upon the makeup of the pool. And, when you come to the codes office and apply that, we're going to ask those questions. And so we're going to then help you to determine what kind of barrier you're going to need based on the pool you're using. So, yeah, a lot of little variables there. We didn't cover them all. That's why it's good to ask questions. So
exactly. No, and I just want to touch on a little bit more on what you said. People often use the term a kiddie pool. Does that require a permit? And going back to what we mentioned earlier, if it holds less than 24 inches of water, then no, a permit is not required. Confusion comes in the name, of what you call it, but it really comes down to how much water it can actually hold. People use different names for different kinds of pools, so it's good to go off of how much water the pool can actually hold. And as we mentioned earlier, a swimming pool is classified as an object that can hold 24 inches or more of water. And no, you cannot drain a pool to 23 inches of water and not have to obtain a permit. So if it's capable of holding 24 inches, a permit will be required. And again, if it's designed to hold less than 24 inches, you do not need a permit to install that pool. And are there other types of permits needed for a pool? It all depends. The outlet to supply power to a pump must be plugged directly into an outlet. The use of an extension cord is not permitted. The pump wiring must be plugged into a ground fault or GFCI outlet. If one is not close by, without the use of an extension cord, then an electrician would have to make a permit application to install an outlet for the pool. These electrical outlets must meet the requirements for outdoor use. Sometimes a plumbing permit could be involved with a pool installation, especially with an in-ground pool. And for all trade required permits or related permits, make sure you check with your local jurisdiction. Just because you're putting up a pool, you may need that fence permit, may need that plumbing permit, may need that electrical permit. So it's just good to check on that. And zoning requirements. You just can't put your pool wherever you want. All pools, no matter the size, other than kiddie pools, must meet local setback requirements. Setbacks are the distances that the pool must be from the property lines. Like here in Hagerstown, you cannot have a pool right up against your property line. They must be a certain amount of feet away from the property line, depending on the zoning district. Mm-hmm. And some other requirements that we have, all pools cannot be located under or above power lines. This should be a pretty obvious one, but the top of the pool water must be at least 25 feet from the overhead power lines, and there must be at least 5 feet of earth between the pool and underground power lines. So there's a lot involved there. You may not know if you have underground power lines at your house. You may not know that. So that's what getting a pool permit will do. We do the research to see what is needed if you can put it there. So
yeah, good information. And a lot of these things are there, even though we may not understand why. Mm-hmm. They are there for a reason because the research has been done. It's just not to create or make life difficult for people. It's all these things are safety related.
Right.
So And really that includes, maintaining the pools as well. Sometimes, you use the pool and then it's out of sight, out of mind. You go inside and you can forget about it. So we encourage, as most jurisdictions do, have some type of codes related to keeping that pool maintained, meaning keeping it clean and environmentally friendly, not allowing it to, overgrow, and you get wild animals in there, and becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and that creates other problems. So that's encouragement as well, as to regularly maintain your swimming pool as well, because most people, they don't realize that they'll buy a pool and it's a great idea, and then I got to maintain it.
If you don't mind if I jump in here, even in the off season, when the pool's not being used, you have your cover on it, and water's just sitting there. It's a prime place for mosquitoes to breed and hang out, and you and your neighbors will not like that very much. So even during the off times in the fall and springtime, make sure you are maintaining your swimming pool.
Yeah, good point as well. So the bottom line with all of this is that all these things are in place to prevent drownings, to create a safe environment for our children. And there are a number of tips that are even provided. Even with all these things in place, there are things that we need to do proactively as far as our conduct as parents or for caretakers, so that we can prevent some tragedies like this. The pool, there's several websites that provide tips to pool safety. And some of those safety tips that can be helpful are, as an example, one mentions one of the best layers of protection is four-sided fencing with a self-closing, self-latching gate around all pools and spas. And this prevents young children from being around water if an adult isn't nearby. And we talked about that earlier. Another key point is designate a water watcher. So this is a person that you've designated that their job is to keep a watch for the children. You might get distracted, go inside or whatever, but that person, that's their one job.
Right. Don't just assume, if it's your spouse or, other family member, friends, just a responsible adult that can be there. Make sure, you're over communicating to make sure somebody has an eye on the people who are in the pool.
Yeah, absolutely. Another tip, and sometimes people don't always think about it, is teach your kids to swim. Mm-hmm. With me, I learned to swim at a very young age. So that can be helpful. And while supervision is critical, it's important for children to learn how to swim, because obviously if a child knows how to swim, then they've lessened that risk.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so learn CPR. We've taken CPR since we've been with the city. Mm-hmm. One of the statistics is that chances are, or the odds are, that you're going to do CPR on a friend or relative.
Yes. Because
just the nature of the numbers.
That's
you're around them.
Yep, you're around them the most, and it's very nice, not necessarily having that physical card in your back pocket, but just having that skill, having that in your back pocket. You never know when you're going to need it, but like Sean said, more than likely it's going to be a very close friend or relative that you're going to need to use it on.
Yeah, and even with being prepared from that respect, if you know CPR, having taken the class ourselves, one thing that stood out really quickly is how much energy it takes. Mm-hmm. In a very short period of time, you kind of almost wore out, and we would trade off. Mm-hmm. So if you can, it's good to have another person there that knows CPR. So one of you's calling 911, the other one's performing CPR, and then you can break one another.
Exactly.
Until paramedics get there. Yeah. So good point there. And when it comes to these portable pools or kiddie pools, if they're really small or if there's not a lot of problems, sometimes it's just best to empty them after every use.
Yes.
Maybe just simpler to lessen the risk on that. And then if you have ladders in pools, make sure they're put away or kept in the pool if it's not properly fenced. And so there's a nice website, poolsafely.gov, if you would like to learn more about pool safety. In fact, on that website, they have an annual pledge where there are thousands of people who sign that pledge, committing to being safer around and in pools. And last year, there were many Olympic swimmers who signed this pledge, including Maryland's own Katie Ledecky and Michael Phelps.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll put that link to that website in the description of the podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or your favorite podcast application, so that you can check out all the safety guidelines and all that information that Sean just went over. I think that about wraps it up for our swimming pool information there. There's a lot of information, a lot of good information, and like we said, we wanted to give you a why as to why we have these codes, and we just want you to be safe out there this summer. We want you to have fun, but we want you to be safe while doing that. So, as I mentioned earlier, we had our viral post from last summer with the pools. If you want to check out more of those type posts, be sure to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can search for us by searching PCAD Hagerstown. That's PCAD Hagerstown. You can subscribe to the Hub-Bub Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and most other podcast players. And if you're not watching us, but you want to, we are on YouTube. You can search for us. Again, PCAD, City of Hagerstown. You can see our smiling faces on our YouTube channel. But if you don't want to see us, that's what the regular audio podcast is for. All right, so now everybody's favorite part of the episode is our weird news story. So we thought this one would be pretty fitting. The title of this article is Swimming in Pot. So $100,000 of marijuana discovered in the backyard pool. So this was in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. An anonymous tip sent police to a house where they uncovered a pool full of pot. It took several trucks to remove all of the plants from the pool. It's quite interesting. It looks like a pool that has not been used in probably decades. They were using it to store all of their pot. It was full of weeds, as one would say. So
we're not going to give you a permit for that, are we?
No.
In fact, we might give a notice to cut the weeds.
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, interesting story, what people will try to do. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening today. Our podcast next month will be an interesting one as well. Sad to say for example, it's not hard to not notice a lot of vacant structures in Hagerstown.
Right, yeah.
So you see them and you wonder, what's going on? Why has that house been vacant so long? What's going on? Is the city doing anything, right? It just seems like nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, there is a lot behind that. So that's going to be the next episode of our podcast next month. We're going to be talking about vacant structures. We actually have a program that's specifically for vacant structures and actually how they're licensed and how that whole program works. So you can understand what's being done continually with those vacant structures. So look forward to that. Now our musical guest to take out our podcast today. This guy was really nice. I met him at a local coffee shop. He was playing music for their grand opening.
Okay.
And just went up and started talking to him. Really, really nice guy. Tim Seals. He's been in Hagerstown, a resident for some 24 years. Been playing music since he was a teenager. He plays the ukulele and has an eclectic taste in music. He's been influenced by all types of music: folk, country, blues, old-time jazz, jug band, gospel, bluegrass, and Americana music. So quite a hodgepodge of influences there. So Tim's been playing for the past few years, performing a wide variety of music and performing in a wide variety of venues such as the local farmers markets. He plays in assisted living facilities, the outlet mall, other Hagerstown events that he's been invited to. And he really just loves reaching out to people and connecting with them through his music. So very personable guy. Of course, you can find him on social media as well, Facebook, YouTube. You can go to Gig Salad and you can message him, and he would love to play for your next event. So with that being said, we'll take our show out and we'll listen to some music by Tim Seals.
Your nice warm bed. Just remember what your old pal said, boy, you got a friend in me. Yeah, you got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. Yes, you got a friend in me. You got troubles, well, I got them too. There ain't nothing in this whole wide world I wouldn't do for you. We'll stick together, then we'll see it through. You got a friend in me. Yes, you got a friend in me. Some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too.